In a certain region, precisely in the Kingdom City, there lived a boy named Reno. He also had a childhood friend named Vincent, and Vincent was the future king of the kingdom where Reno lived. One day, Reno sacrificed himself to save Vincent from an attack by an evil witch. As a result of the attack, Reno received an irreversible curse where Reno, who was originally a man, suddenly turned into a woman. After a long period of time, Reno, who had turned into a woman, began to fall in love with his friend Vincent. However, in the midst of his affection, Vincent suddenly gave Reno a difficult choice. He asked Reno to return to being a man because Vincent had found the antidote, so Reno could return to his original form. Will Reno this time follow Vincent's request to become a man again? Or will Reno choose to maintain his love for Vincent as a woman? It all started when Reno bravely saved Vincent. Currently, a handsome man is seen walking through the city carrying a bouquet of roses with his sharp and cold gaze. The man looks like a prince. He has a long robe draped behind his charm, and even many women scream hysterically because of what they see. Indeed, the man is named Vincent. He is a prince. Currently, Vincent is visiting his friend's residence. He is greeted enthusiastically by his friend's parents. They even always humble themselves when saying that they are just low nobility who are not worthy to receive kindness from Vincent, who is notably a prince of their kingdom. Vincent is visiting Reno's house, where Reno is the one who is always with him. But this time the girl can only lock herself in her room. More precisely, Reno doesn't want to meet Vincent because she is upset with her current self. With her graceful steps, Reno sees that Vincent is visiting her again. Perhaps Vincent feels guilty because Reno tried to save him from the brutal attack of their enemies. Yes, Reno is Vincent's friend who is always with him, and Reno was a man, but due to something unknown, when Reno tried to protect Vincent, he was cursed where Reno turned into a woman. Originally, Reno was a pure man, but everything changed in an instant when he deflected the enemy's attack from Vincent. Reno was enchanted and turned into a beautiful woman. Reno is always associated with Vincent because wherever Vincent is, Reno is always by his side. Vincent is the eldest son of a hero, and he is a crown prince who will inherit the throne from the king. Because Reno is Vincent's childhood friend, that's why Reno is always by his side. Even when many women surround Vincent, Reno remains loyal even though his presence is not acknowledged by Vincent's followers. According to Reno's knowledge, Vincent is blessed with innate talents from his father, both in academics, martial arts, and social life. More precisely, Vincent is the pride of the kingdom and considered perfect in all aspects, so it's not surprising if people don't pay attention to him. In every step Vincent takes, there are always women screaming hysterically because they love Vincent so much. Vincent has all the wealth, honor, and handsome appearance. Of course, he is idolized by many men, especially since Vincent is so popular. Because Reno is always with Vincent, they are like a set. Reno's togetherness with Vincent brought a disaster for Reno because when he tried to save Vincent from an enemy attack, surprisingly, the attack completely changed Reno's life. Reno, who was originally male, suddenly turned into a beautiful female figure that even Reno himself didn't recognize due to the drastic change because he was hit by a magic attack. Reno didn't expect that everything would change in an instant. He knew that he loved Vincent very much as a friend, but he thought the path he took was a mistake. Reno only loved Vincent because his friend looked cool, and he wanted to always be near Vincent and accompany him. But what could he do? Everything didn't go according to Reno's predictions. Because he felt guilty towards Reno, Vincent brought the best priest from his kingdom to ensure Reno's well-being, and Vincent wanted the priest to break the curse on Reno. Reno felt touched by Vincent's kindness towards him, but Reno felt that Vincent didn't need to try to return him even though he wanted to. Seeing Vincent feeling guilty about him made Reno unable to bear if Vincent had to take responsibility for him. The flowers brought by Vincent were also thrown to Reno because the flowers were specifically meant to be given to his savior. Reno, who had been friends with Vincent for quite a long time, only realized that Vincent always acted sweetly. Many people liked Vincent and chased him, even often inviting Vincent to go to parties together, especially since Vincent has above-average handsomeness, but he never exploited his handsomeness because Vincent often acted cold. When Reno was still Vincent's male friend, he often became a shield for the man, so that Vincent's journey was always comfortable without the hustle and bustle surrounding him. Even Vincent himself felt afraid that Reno would be labeled as a bad person, but Reno didn't care. He stuck to his stance. Walking side by side with Vincent added to Reno's self-confidence. He wanted that when Reno ascended the throne as king later, he only needed to be loved by his followers, while Reno would always be a shield for Vincent. Vincent realized that he was always accompanied by Reno. He was afraid that his friend would be bound to him in the future. But still, Reno remained stubborn with all his thoughts. He wanted to create Vincent as a good king because if Vincent made a mistake, Reno would also be involved in the problem. On the other hand, Reno was already proud to be Vincent's follower. Vincent, who heard Reno's explanation, could only be silent. He listened to all the chatter from his male friend. He didn't expect that Reno would be so loyal in accompanying him. Currently, Reno could only smile warmly. He dared to do anything as long as Vincent was loved by his people, even if Reno had to be hated by many people. Reno liked that made Vincent feel feverish. Even because Reno's body was smaller than Vincent's, it made Vincent easily stroke the man's head gently, as if Reno was a little girl. Because he saw Reno's sweet struggle, it made Vincent promise Reno that later he would become a great king loved by many people. Of course, if Vincent becomes a king later, he will ensure that Reno lives peacefully and gets an important position in the kingdom. Hearing that made Reno feel happy because he didn't need to bother looking for a job in the future, and he would only rely on Vincent alone. Being born as Vincent's follower made Reno very lucky that the prince he served was a very good person. Many people wanted to be like Reno because he was always by Vincent's side. All that was just a flashback from Reno's previous story, because now his position has changed. He is no longer Vincent's male friend because of his sudden physical change after being cursed. Currently, Reno has changed gender into a woman, and Vincent is trying to change Reno back to the previous Reno, but it seems the seal of the curse that befell Reno is so strong and difficult to break. Everyone fell silent, including the priest brought by Vincent from the kingdom. The priest's silence made everyone quiet, full of anxiety, and after knowing that the magic that befell Reno was a very frightening type of magic, it made the atmosphere even more tense. The magic was often touted as a forbidden magic spell that should not be used, and once Reno's body was affected by the magic, the effect was difficult to cancel or even impossible to cancel at all. Reno was stunned. He even didn't know what to say anymore because in reality, he knew he would never return to being a man. Now it wasn't Reno who was angry at his own fate, but his friend Vincent. Vincent's anger was at the top of his head. The man didn't expect that Reno had to bear the bad consequences because he saved him. Vincent's face turned red. His gaze was so sharp. The man screamed hysterically because the priest he brought couldn't do anything. He said that all the words uttered by the priest were lies. He ranted that the spell that enchanted Reno must be a magic spell that could be cancelled. But that was all just a consolation for himself because the priest had already said no, that Reno couldn't return to his original form. Vincent didn't accept it. He kept threatening the priest until Reno himself had to intervene to break up the fight. And Reno said he didn't mind having a female form because from the beginning Reno was too relaxed in responding to his own life. He didn't even have a fiancé to worry about because of his physical change. Vincent's thundering voice made Reno realize that the man in front of him was really angry at the fate that played with Reno. But the problem was Reno didn't care about it. He had resigned himself. Reno explained why he was too relaxed in responding to the strange incident that befell him because for Reno, Vincent was the only one who was affected if he received the curse that befell Reno. Reno was just grateful that Vincent wasn't the one who had to bear the consequences of the magic spell. So according to Reno, everything he did was just normal because Reno's position was Vincent's follower, where Vincent would continue the kingdom's throne. So it was only natural for Reno to put himself in danger so that Vincent wouldn't get into trouble later. Reno's sweet smile. He tried to comfort Vincent, who was on the verge of wrath. Sweet words then came out of Reno's mouth, saying that it was an honor for him to protect the noble prince, and hearing that little by little the prince could calm his anger. Flattery after flattery uttered by Reno made him reflect for a moment. Vincent didn't understand. His heart was so hurt. He didn't know why Reno always put Vincent first over himself. Vincent really felt guilty. He could only accept the fact that Reno always acted kindly towards him, and that made the prince feel struck, while on the other hand, Vincent's father and mother could only look resigned seeing their child had turned into another figure they knew. A flashback of Vincent's memory when he met Reno as a child echoed in his mind, where at that time little Reno looked proudly at the greatness possessed by Vincent when they rode a dragon and flew around the city where they lived. In the past, Reno was a little boy who always accompanied Vincent, and acknowledged Vincent's greatness as a successor to the kingdom. All the things Reno had gone through were not far from what he had dreamed of since long ago, where he wanted Vincent to become a king, and when that happened, he would ensure that Vincent would make their kingdom better. Of course, to see all that, Reno was determined to always be by Vincent's side no matter what happened. Behind Vincent, who was known to outsiders as a firm, quiet, and cold figure, it was different with Reno because he saw how Vincent's childish side always amazed him. This time the atmosphere was silent for a while until Reno spoke again. He called Vincent with a soft voice, saying that currently he was no longer a man, so Reno could no longer be Vincent's aide, and he asked Vincent to find a new aide. Of course, the statement made Vincent shocked beyond belief, because he was already used to Reno's presence that made his days colorful. Reno's sudden explanation about his resignation made Vincent unable to accept it all. Even now, Reno tried to make various reasons to Vincent so that the man could accept the fact that he was no longer like Reno before being cursed. Truly, the atmosphere was so different. Vincent tried to reach Reno's hand gently and said that he didn't want to separate from Reno because no matter what, they always spent time together wherever Vincent went. Reno was always by his side. A touching atmosphere enveloped the two friends, even though now they looked like a pair of lovers who had to be separated by circumstances. Vincent, who felt sad, hugged Reno. Even Reno himself couldn't stand hearing Vincent's sobs, making his heart melt and feel the sadness too. Actually, Reno felt heavy-hearted to leave Vincent. He didn't want to either, but circumstances forced them to separate because Reno thought he could no longer accompany Vincent because his physique was already different. Yeah, all their sadness was now paid off. If he became Vincent's aide again, it seemed impossible for Reno. Maybe Reno could become Vincent's personal maid, but suddenly Vincent refused, and that made Reno a little surprised. Plus Vincent's sudden explanation stating that he wanted to marry Reno as a woman. Wow, such a crazy joke. Reno didn't expect that Vincent could say such a forbidden thing. He even thought Vincent was crazy, but it seemed Vincent was a very open person. Even now he had planned to tell everyone about their marriage. Yes, Reno couldn't understand Vincent's way of thinking. Everything said by the man was never filtered first, and that was Vincent's bad habit known by Reno. Reno's loud voice rejecting Vincent's explanation to marry was certainly ignored by the man because Vincent was a hard-to-predict person. Enough already. The current atmosphere was so chaotic. Vincent's thoughts couldn't be interfered with, or perhaps Vincent felt guilty towards Reno because Reno couldn't marry a woman since he was now also a woman, and Reno also couldn't marry a man because he was originally a man, and perhaps based on that, Vincent felt he needed to take responsibility for Reno. But according to Reno, all that was not true and not as simple as Vincent thought. But looking at Vincent's facial expression, he was really serious about making Reno his wife so that he no longer had to deal with other women. What kind of wrong thinking is this? It even made Reno dizzy with his friend's thoughts. Currently, an argument occurred between Vincent and Reno. They both held firmly to their own words. Reno tried to explain to Vincent that they couldn't possibly marry, especially since Vincent was a prince and needed an heir, while Reno couldn't provide that because his status was not a pure woman, but a man who was hit by magic and became a woman. Heir. Vincent thought he had a good idea about that, and maybe it would work. Funnily, Vincent's explanation made Reno panic beyond belief. Reno couldn't believe why Vincent trusted him so much, especially wanting to marry him even when Vincent knew that Reno wasn't a real woman. Reno just felt annoyed when Vincent didn't have trust in a woman, and he really felt worried about that. Even Vincent himself felt surprised why Reno kept rejecting him. Currently, the narrow room where they were made Reno even more stuffy. He didn't know what to do anymore because Vincent kept saying that he had to marry Reno because Reno was created for Vincent, and Reno's concern explained everything. Reno's head was getting dizzier. He didn't know how to reject the request anymore. What Reno could do now was just mess up his hair that was starting to get tangled. As if he couldn't make Vincent feel disappointed, Reno became an obedient figure again. He never could reject Vincent's request, and regarding the marriage, Reno also agreed to it. Even now they were like a romantic couple, where Vincent held Reno's hands tightly, which looked so romantic. For Reno, this marriage was just a game. Reno would play his role as a good wife for Vincent with the aim that Reno could appreciate women more later. Now it wasn't just Reno's form that changed into a woman, but his life also changed 100%. As Reno suspected, his parents were delighted to hear the news that Reno would be married by a prince and asked Reno to accept the proposal. Reno's parents were not people who thought about their own interests. They always supported whatever decisions their children made, especially when hearing that Reno would be proposed to become the prince's wife. Reno's facial expression suddenly turned sour because Reno already knew that his parents' response would always be excited. The news that Reno would marry a noble family was a rare opportunity, especially with the incident that he was a transgender. Reno would marry Vincent according to his promise, but because he knew that marrying Vincent wouldn't provide any benefits, he felt sorry for his parents. But for Vincent's future, Reno could accompany Vincent until the man trusted women later, and until that happened, he had to be patient with his role as Vincent's lover. Again and again, the man always wanted to win Reno's heart. Even Reno himself didn't know that Vincent was a romantic figure because every time Vincent met him, he never came empty-handed, but always with a large bouquet of flowers. This time Vincent's visit to Reno was because he wanted to tell that he would hunt monsters, and he wanted Reno to come with him. Currently, the awkward atmosphere had started to melt where Reno realized that Vincent wanted him to get out of his comfort zone because since Reno turned into a woman, Reno had never left the house at all. So for that reason Vincent invited Reno to hunt together, so that Reno wouldn't be too awkward to socialize with others. Especially all that was just to train Reno if he met many people, and for starters, he wanted to bring Reno to meet a few people first. Reno knew Vincent's good intentions. He just thought it would be boring if he always closed access to the outside world. So his decision to go with Vincent was a good thing. Vincent's treatment of Reno never changed. Vincent still treated Reno like a man. Even now, when Reno hadn't agreed to go with Vincent, the man first ended the decision. Perhaps marrying someone not because of love, but because of responsibility was something that made Reno a bit reluctant. But to help Vincent later, he had to be willing to change his identity. Reno was already annoyed. He even clenched his fists tightly because he wanted to make Vincent realize that Reno wasn't his partner. Reno accepted Vincent's proposal because he wanted to find an extraordinary partner for the man. That was a dream of a follower for his master. That was what Reno wanted to convey, but all his words only reached his throat. He didn't dare to reveal the facts to Vincent, especially for Reno. The meaning of his life was only as Vincent's follower. The awaited day had arrived where Reno would leave the house for the first time since he became a woman. Reno panicked. He didn't know what proper clothes to wear. He didn't even understand the ins and outs of a woman. It took quite a long time for Reno to get ready and choose suitable clothes for him until finally Vincent came. The man appeared with his handsomeness, but Reno was no less beautiful when Vincent greeted him. Reno suddenly turned into an elegant and graceful princess. As if Vincent was enchanted by Reno because the woman in front of him was so beautiful. There was even a flower effect surrounding Reno. Vincent was silent for a while. He was mesmerized by Reno's appearance that looked different from usual. The girl was cheerful, beautiful, and seemed sweet when wearing her new dress. Vincent even almost had difficulty breathing, but seeing how cheerful Reno explained that he was busy choosing clothes suitable to wear to stand beside Vincent made the man listen to every word Reno said while looking at the girl in awe. Vincent, who was initially silent, now held his forehead as if he thought that if Reno really wore clothes liked by Vincent, it meant Reno had been so infatuated with him from the beginning, and getting Vincent's unexpected statement made Reno embarrassed. He didn't think the man could think that openly. Currently, Reno was so embarrassed. His face turned tomato red because he couldn't hold back his shame, especially he could only close his eyes not wanting to see Vincent. Behind his shame, Reno was even more shocked when Vincent asked him to show the underwear he was using, and that was crazy for Reno. He didn't expect Vincent to be that blunt. Vincent's heavy voice ordering Reno to show something sensitive like that made Reno shudder. His body got goosebumps instantly remembering Vincent's mindset. Vincent's flat face with that indecent order made Reno even more flustered. He even panicked himself not expecting this to happen to him. Truly this time Reno's body trembled violently. Vincent always forced Reno to show the underwear he was using because Vincent knew Reno was using it because Vincent liked it, and of course Vincent demanded his right if Reno was wearing the underwear to please Vincent. Especially now they were alone, no one would see their actions. Vincent's tempting gaze made Reno tremble in fear. The distance between Reno and Vincent could no longer be measured because they were so close. Especially surprisingly, Vincent slowly pulled the skirt used by Reno because the man was still curious and demanded his right from Reno. Reno tried to reject Vincent. With all his strength, he gave space for himself with Vincent. But of course Vincent wouldn't stay silent, and Reno knew that if the man in front of him had spoken, then the words must be obeyed. If not, their business would never be finished. Reno chose voluntarily. He himself slowly pulled his skirt up so that Vincent could freely see the underwear used by Reno. Vincent smiled satisfied. Now what he had long desired to see would soon be realized. Currently, Vincent looked more like a man with lewd thoughts. For now, Reno was still sane. He only showed a small part of what should be seen by Vincent with the reason that they weren't officially engaged yet, so he would only show it a little. Switching to the activity they should do, namely with the mission so that Reno could go out to breathe fresh air. Reno tried to push Vincent's large body with a few pearl words he uttered, until finally Reno managed to get his feet out of the house that had been imprisoning him after some time ago turning into a woman. Currently, the fresh air hit Reno's skin so noticeably, especially now Reno was sitting in front and Vincent was riding his horse like a romantic couple. Behind all that, Reno thought that Vincent didn't completely hate women because when Reno had a girl's form, Vincent still liked the body shape of a woman. It was better if he didn't want his business to become longer. Reno thought not to provoke Vincent because Reno might be overwhelmed with Vincent's thoughts that he never expected. Reno also realized that now there was a big change in his body, where previously he didn't look as small as now if compared to Vincent's body. But indeed for Vincent's height, he was taller than Reno, but not as stark as now. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Vincent wasn't focused while riding. He was instead reminiscing when Reno wore women's clothes that were so beautiful in his opinion, especially when Reno said that he wore the clothes because he knew Vincent would like them. Even Vincent's sigh was clearly heard by Reno, and Reno thought that the biggest possibility was Vincent was still angry at him. Upon arriving at the destination, Vincent and Reno's presence was warmly welcomed by the villagers. Vincent's arrival, who was touted to exterminate the monsters entering the village, made people scream hysterically, and some of them wondered about Reno's presence. How could they not? The beautiful Reno couldn't escape many people's views. That's why some of them dared to ask if Reno would join Vincent in hunting to catch the monsters, and of course that was approved by Vincent. But Vincent didn't realize that the current Reno was different from the previous Reno, so Reno slightly demanded Vincent about what the man had declared. Maybe previously Reno didn't mind if he had to join Vincent in hunting, but now Reno's situation had changed where his strength was not as great as before because his position had changed. Currently, Vincent walked with full determination. The man moved into the forest full of vigilant steps accompanied by Reno, who always nagged Vincent about him being much weaker than before, and hearing that Vincent, who was initially focused on the situation, turned around to look at Reno behind him. Currently, Reno could only groan annoyed, especially when Vincent mocked him, because before and now there was no change at all according to Vincent with the power possessed by Reno. Their journey was quite long to the forest where the monsters were, and of course that was very tiring. But the hunt couldn't be stopped just like that until one time Vincent saw several monsters right in front of them, and that's why Vincent asked Reno to stay alert and always walk side by side with him. 1, 2, 3 all slashes from left and right, front and back were smoothly done by Vincent. The man turned into a mighty figure ready to protect the people around him. The monsters' attacks came from all directions. Even Vincent was a bit overwhelmed. But because his sword skills had greatly improved from before, he easily slashed and cut the monsters' bodies easily. He didn't seem to have any difficulty fighting his enemies, while Reno could only take shelter behind Vincent. Just with one punch, the monster in front of Vincent immediately flipped. Its neck bone broke, and Vincent didn't feel any resistance from his enemy at all. On the other hand, Reno just watched every agile movement done by Vincent to defeat his opponent. Actually, from the beginning, Reno didn't have an important role to help Vincent in battle matters. Since childhood with Vincent, the man could only be a spectator, or more precisely, he only praised how great Vincent was in his eyes. Vincent never changed. The man remained as great as ever, even greater than before. It felt like Reno could fall in love with the man full of courage with such strong arm muscles. Often when Reno saw how great Vincent was, he always said that the man was a hero figure for him. After being busy staring at Vincent's handsomeness and strength made Reno distracted. He never thought that a monster came sneaking behind him, and that certainly made Reno feel shocked. He almost stumbled finding that he was surrounded by a burly monster behind him. If observed, currently Reno was experiencing a downturn because he didn't have a weapon to fight the monster. Especially the monster was so big, and to fight it, Reno didn't have any strength at all. If observed, The swing of the weapon done by the monster could make Reno's bones instantly crushed if he was hit by the deadly attack. Almost Reno became the monster giant's meal, but he still had luck because Vincent came right on time, where the man instead slashed the monster mercilessly into 2 parts. Reno cried. He looked at Vincent full of emotion. He even tried to explain that he had tried to fight the monster, but to lift the sword alone he was unable. So Reno tried to surrender, and it turned out Vincent came to save him. Reno cried. He was so struck because if Vincent didn't come to save him, maybe he was only left with a name, and seeing that Vincent felt pity for Reno, especially his friend already had no energy. Vincent tried to be more attentive to Reno, and that succeeded in touching Reno's heart. After the tense battle in the middle of the forest ended, this time Vincent didn't let Reno be alone. The man even didn't allow Reno to walk. It was seen now that Vincent was carrying Reno with one hand. Reno of course blushed because if he was a man, maybe he could fight back. But now his position had changed. Even strength was no longer possessed by him. Reno didn't stop praising Vincent's greatness and handsomeness, but that all only lasted temporarily because the man who was carrying him now still had lewd thoughts towards Reno. Currently, Reno is being interrogated by his mother. Reno should not refuse if later he has to marry Prince Vincent, because the prince is willing to take responsibility for supporting Reno as his woman. Hearing that, Reno could only stay silent. He chose to sit nicely on the sofa and not refute every word from his mother. Every piece of advice that came out of his mother's mouth was indeed true. Perhaps everything that happened was complicated, but it didn't matter if Reno just pretended to be Vincent's wife. Reno didn't mind being with Vincent even though there was no love in it. But according to Reno, everything would be very complicated because Vincent didn't like women and wouldn't want to find another prospective wife besides him. As if slapped hard by his mother, where Reno's mother explained that a former man would never find a suitable partner. That's why the prince was kind enough to make him a concubine. Marrying Prince Vincent was the path that would make Reno the happiest later. Maybe. But there were many considerations that Reno had to make later because there would be many complicated problems he had to solve. After Reno waited, perhaps he would be happy living with Vincent. But what about the man later? Would the man really be happy with Reno? But it seemed Vincent looked fine, and even prepared a dress for Reno to wear so casually. Vincent's smile at that time made him look cool, especially since the man always showed his charm to Reno until Reno had to close his eyes because of the glare of Reno's gaze when facing Vincent. Beautiful dresses, trendy accessories for women. Everything was bought out by Vincent just to make Reno happy. Even all the servants in Reno's house became envious of the girl because since Reno had turned into a woman, Vincent's attention never left Reno. Reno thought it was true that all of Vincent's attention was focused on him, and Vincent had tried to be such a great prince. But Reno never understood the contents of Vincent's head. The prince he knew didn't like women. But strangely, every small detail about clothes or accessories worn by women, the man easily knew it. Even Reno himself was confused about the statement that Vincent didn't like a woman. In Reno's reverie about Vincent, he was suddenly shocked by the news that someone who had cursed him into a woman had now received an indictment, meaning the person had been given a punishment commensurate with what he had done. The news was very shocking for Reno. The problem was if only the person who made him cursed into a woman was indicted. That was normal, but the problem was Vincent added to the punishment and involved the perpetrator's family until stripping their noble status. Vincent also casually told Reno, so Reno himself was made dizzy seeing Vincent's so firm nature. Reno felt everything was excessive, but if thought again, if Vincent was the one cursed into a woman, there might be chaos in their kingdom, and the punishment seemed a bit commensurate. Reno was so doubtful about his own stance. Actually, there was a little anxiety in Reno's heart after he was cursed into a woman, but sometimes he had no worries because Vincent had taken him away. Often Reno wondered to himself whether this relaxed feeling was good or bad. After a quite serious conversation about the heavy punishment received by the person who cursed Reno, their conversation shifted where Vincent asked Reno to go back to school. Of course, Reno was flustered. He couldn't possibly go to school in his current state because he would definitely be laughed at by his friends. But it seemed the worry didn't bear fruit because Vincent had warned everyone not to mock Reno's current form. Reno never thought that Vincent would be such a quick responder, and this was the coolest part where Vincent cared so much about him, and that made Reno could fall in love. But wait, if remembering how arrogant Vincent's nature was, Reno couldn't imagine how when Vincent scolded people who wanted to get close to him, and that's when Reno started to panic. He thought about what if Vincent was labeled as a bad figure by his society later, but it seemed the man looked normal. He even wanted to openly tell his school friends that he and Reno were engaged, and that obviously made Reno panic. He even couldn't believe it, because even to announce it hadn't happened yet. Because they weren't officially engaged. So because he didn't want to reveal their status and firmly forbade Vincent not to do anything without Reno's approval. Truly at that time, a small debate started between Reno and Vincent. Reno was just annoyed because for him, Vincent pitted Reno too much because Reno felt Vincent was too excessive. Reno didn't want Vincent to take responsibility for him and marry him. According to him, all that didn't need to be done, but Vincent yelled at Reno that he just wanted Reno to get a deserving reward in the form of happiness because of the hard work Reno had done to save Vincent. Yes, Reno knew that, but he felt everything was wrong. Currently, Vincent digested all of Reno's words, so he became serious again. Even his legs were crossed, a sign that this time he wasn't joking. Vincent asked about the definition of happiness according to Reno, and of course, Reno happily answered that happiness for him was marrying a beautiful woman full of love. That expression certainly wasn't something Vincent should tout. He just digested every hidden meaning behind Reno's words to him. Love. It seemed there was no one who loved Vincent more than Reno. Even Vincent knew that because without being asked, Reno had done everything for Vincent, even to the point of thinking about small details that Vincent liked. That couldn't be denied by Reno because it was true that he liked Vincent. No mistake, the man in front of Reno was indeed so authoritative and very handsome, especially when he propped his chin with his hand. Then what made Reno's heart beat faster was when Vincent said that Reno wanted love from Vincent, love between a woman and a man. This time, Vincent couldn't be handled by Reno because the man even teased Reno to be able to have a relationship like a pair of lovers. Vincent's gaze at Reno was so tempting. Especially now Vincent gently stroked his lips, and that made Reno almost enchanted. But luckily he could still control his emotions not to do strange things to Vincent. It wasn't that Reno didn't know what his own body wanted, but he just tried to hold back all his bad thoughts about Vincent. Perhaps he would live his life as a woman, but he never thought that later he would have a relationship with Vincent. And perhaps if he had to associate with a man, Reno couldn't imagine that. But if it was Vincent, he could do a man's fantasy about how to be a woman in front of the man he liked. In an instant, Vincent turned into a wild man. He gently stroked the top of Reno's head, even not giving the slightest gap to release Reno. Even he easily pulled Reno's small body into his embrace until making Reno's body hot. Currently, in Reno's eyes, Vincent turned into such a fierce man. Especially now Vincent so easily pinned his body and touched sensitive parts on his woman's part. Reno's cheeks blushed. He was like a boiled tomato until wilted, unable to do anything. He even didn't move at all. Afraid something bad would happen, Reno, who had little energy, could only pat Vincent's broad chest so that the man towering over him would immediately move away from his body. But it seemed this time Reno's action led to disaster for himself because now his position became so sensitive because he indirectly pinned Vincent. Truly, this time Reno couldn't fight. He was already aroused because of Vincent's touch on him. Even he wanted Vincent to always stroke him. If thought about, it was impossible for Vincent to have done more because as far as Reno knew, Vincent didn't like women. But something that made Reno hysterical because Vincent had studied that sensitive thing long before, but knowing Vincent was perfect from various sides made Reno even more admiring of the man. This time, Reno had lost completely because he was persuaded by Vincent's seduction because now Vincent had easily stroked him and Reno didn't resist at all. Vincent's authority and handsomeness made Reno last indirectly. Rejection after rejection shown by Reno made Vincent feel guilty. So Vincent apologized for his audacity and chose to leave Reno in confusion. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Reno didn't understand Vincent's way of thinking where he suddenly seduced and then suddenly left just like that. Yeah, Reno couldn't understand. The woman now could only resign and hide her face behind the sofa. Several days had passed, and this time without any notice at all. The kingdom gave Reno a gift where the gift was a new school uniform for him. Initially Reno didn't realize it, but because there was a letter in the gift, he carefully read it where there was an expression of thanks from the queen for protecting Vincent, so the queen gave new clothes to Reno, so that the woman could wear them, and the queen was sure that Reno would look great. Reno didn't expect that his care was known by the queen. Initially regarding the uniform, Reno would only wear his old uniform before he turned into a woman, but he couldn't if he didn't wear the gift from the queen, because that was the respect given by the queen to him. Now the awaited day had come. Currently Reno casually walked in his school corridor. Even the admiring gazes from the men didn't leave Reno because Reno looked so cute and beautiful. Even everyone didn't think that it was Reno, Vincent's loyal follower, who was a man originally. Currently, Reno tried to be confident even though his heart was so restless when remembering the dark times where Reno was so cruel to many people because he didn't allow people to get close to Vincent, who was notably Reno's childhood friend. Reno thought he would be laughed at, but in fact, people admired Reno without the woman's knowledge, and some of them also boldly greeted Reno first. Reno, with the act of a woman, gracefully ignored, looking elegantly at who the figure was who dared to greet Reno. After Reno was cursed to become a woman, he really changed. His small face with his big round eyes and his curly eyelashes to his long flowing hair became an attraction like a magnet for men. Even now the men in his school chased after Reno. Many questions from the men who wanted to know if Reno was an exchange student because they had never seen Reno at all, and behind the crowd of many men, Vincent suddenly came pulling Reno until making them shocked beyond belief because the woman they idolized had become Vincent's. Reno, who was suddenly pulled from the crowd of many men, made him suddenly stagger, falling onto Vincent's broad chest. Reno didn't understand why Vincent came to meet him, but clearly now Vincent preferred to pull Reno from the crowd and invite him to tour the school because Reno had not left the house for a long time and interacted with their school residents. Because many pairs of eyes saw them walking side by side, several speculations arose, and as a bomb exploding in a split second, where people now knew that Reno had changed form into a woman. Even many of them praised that now Reno's form was truly a beautiful woman. Some of them also openly said that they preferred the current Reno over Reno's previous form. Reno suddenly became a beautiful and so cute woman. Then not infrequently many men in his school admired how beautiful Reno's figure was. Currently, even to sit quietly in class, Reno couldn't because people were so curious about him. Even many of them who never talked to Reno came to meet him. Of course, Reno was a bit annoyed. His life became restless, but he considered all that as a challenge in his life. Seeing Reno, who was already tired because of the many interactions he had to serve, made Vincent annoyed, and now he approached Reno, who was interacting with many men, until making him ignored, and that's why Vincent became a bit more sensitive. Vincent's sudden arrival, and how Vincent treated Reno because it was the second time Vincent pulled Reno from the crowd. He also didn't understand why the man held his hand tightly, then said that Reno must always be near Vincent. In the past, when Reno was around Vincent, many people screamed wanting to approach the man, but after Reno's form change, everyone seemed to disappear, and that's what Reno worried about if Vincent was no longer as popular as before. That wasn't the problem. Now Reno's presence, who had changed form into a beautiful woman, made the women feel inferior, so what worried Vincent more was when Reno was far from him. The women bullied Reno without his knowledge, and that was worse than monster attacks, because Vincent couldn't be sarcastic to the women. Vincent's inadequate explanation made Reno even more restless. He didn't know why Vincent was so protective of him, and told him to always be near Vincent, even though at school there were no dangerous things like monster arrivals. But still Vincent seemed to be hiding something from Reno. Perhaps Vincent had done something completely unknown to Reno. Currently, Vincent could only sigh because Reno was truly innocent. He didn't know that he was in danger, especially Vincent had promised that he wouldn't do reckless things again. Vincent swore that he would protect Reno's honor, but if Reno wasn't by his side, perhaps other men would do it to Reno. It turned out Vincent's worry made Reno feel safe, but of course he wasn't a stupid girl because he was originally a man who understood how the dirty thoughts of men were. Even originally, he was also a man with bad thoughts. There was a burst of laughter from the lie expressed by Reno, who stated that he wouldn't be easily seduced by men, but what made Reno feel the saddest was when Vincent said that he wouldn't touch Reno again, so Reno was a bit disappointed. He chose to leave Vincent just like that without giving an explanation because Reno was afraid if Vincent knew Reno enjoyed Vincent's game, but because Vincent had sworn not to do it again. Perhaps that was the last time Reno felt the vibration on himself. Reno didn't want to be near Vincent, because Vincent didn't know that what Reno wanted was not to stay away from him, but to understand Reno himself. In Reno's quite long journey, while cursing his own fate, Reno didn't not want to be touched, but it seemed the man didn't understand the code given by Reno. Reno walked alone for quite a long time until finally a group of men approached him, even teasing Reno. Reno was powerless now. His body was not as strong as before, even though he had a little strength, but not stronger than Vincent, especially now Reno had changed form into a woman. Surrounded by many men made Reno powerless, especially those men freely harassed him with the reason that they were all men, when in fact now Reno had changed form into a woman, and that was an inappropriate act if seen by many people. Force after force received by Reno. Even he had tried to evade not wanting to do indecent things in front of many people. Now Reno was cornered. His body even stuck to the wall because he could no longer escape. According to Reno, all the things thought by the men were indeed appropriate, especially originally. He was also a man, but the situation now was different, where now Reno was the one receiving bad treatment from those men. It felt all the things Reno got today were so disgusting according to him. He even wanted to give curses to many men in front of him, but of course Reno had to think long, so that this problem didn't become a mockery of many people. Reno's hand was held. Even he was pushed to the classroom wall by the men in front of him. Those men were ready to harass Reno to satisfy their lust with the pretext that Reno was originally a man, so it didn't matter if they treated Reno as their male friend. Reno had evaded. He didn't want to receive disgusting kisses from the men in front of him until one time in his resignation Vincent came seeing the actions of people who wanted to harm Reno. Vincent's arrival seemed to signal that the man was indeed created to protect Reno. Vincent also affirmed to those men that their behavior was not good, especially now Reno had the kingdom's badge, which meant Reno was a figure who had contributed to the kingdom. Vincent's gaze at that time made everyone silent for a moment, then gave unreasonable reasons, because they knew if dealing with Vincent would make their lives more complicated. Instantly Reno, who was being held hostage, was forced to be released, and of course Reno could breathe a sigh of relief. The flash of Vincent's gaze had signaled that he was so furious when seeing Reno surrounded by many men and almost harassed. Vincent also gave a warning to those people: if they dared carelessly disturb Reno, then they had to be ready to make themselves enemies of the kingdom people, and that wasn't a good sign, so the men who humiliated Reno quickly apologized, so that all problems could be resolved well without destroying their lives. Vincent admitted that he had a bad feeling when Reno wasn't by his side, so Vincent looked for Reno in any direction until finally he found the woman already cornered, not daring to fight the people disturbing her. Only a sigh of relief from Reno was heard until finally Reno was able to speak, saying that he was fine, and being a woman was the hardest thing, especially having to face men with lewd thoughts. Hearing that made Vincent feel even more guilty. He repeatedly apologized to Reno because he was no better than the men who tried to harass Reno earlier. Reno was stunned. He looked deeply into Vincent's eyes. The man's statement wasn't a lie, and Reno knew that, but the problem was he didn't feel that Vincent would do bad to him. Honestly, Vincent's treatment of Reno was different from most men. Even now Reno tried to calm the man in front of him. Reno took both of Vincent's hands and placed them on his cheeks, always saying that Vincent was different from the people who had disturbed him, and when with Vincent Reno was much more comfortable and not afraid of bad things that would befall him. Reno's sudden statement could only be replied with silence for a few moments by Vincent. He didn't expect his treatment to be considered normal by Reno. All good and bad things done by Vincent to Reno weren't a problem, because their closeness had become proof that mutual trust made their relationship even closer. To keep feelings from growing into a disaster for Reno, the girl could only argue that the actions Vincent did to her were caused by them being childhood friends. Likewise Reno, he had considered Vincent as part of himself. Vincent's naughty actions a few days ago that made Reno flustered were now considered just as a joke of their friendship, so that their relationship wouldn't be awkward later, and that was a mature decision thought by Reno, even though there was a little disappointment in his heart, but so that he could be calm by Vincent's side, then that decision was the best choice for now. This time it was Reno who started pulling Vincent to prove that Reno didn't mind Vincent's behavior that almost gave him a heart attack. The next morning, even when the air was still cool, not yet hit by the heat of the sun, but Reno was already made hot first because of people's talks that never stopped linking him. Many rumors that Reno had heard because the badge given by the Queen to Reno made people reluctant to approach him, especially after the incident where Vincent suddenly disbanded the actions of men who wanted to approach Reno. For those people, the plan symbolized that Reno had officially engaged to Vincent, when in fact it was all just a thank you sign from the Queen, because Reno had saved Vincent no more than that. Yeah, The rumor about Vincent and Reno's relationship wasn't wrong, because basically Vincent was indeed going to propose to him officially, but it all hadn't happened. So Reno was a bit restless with many people's talks, because in every corner he walked there were people discussing him. This time Reno couldn't fight Vincent, because in fact the man had accompanied him, even helped Reno. Many people who wanted to fill him canceled their intentions because of Vincent's presence. Reno was already comfortable with the man, especially when remembering they would do the engagement. Reno's heart felt pounding. All sweet words and Vincent's treatment after made Reno feel enchanted. Perhaps this time Reno really fell in love with his friend, even though there was a little annoyance, because Vincent always distanced himself, but that love started to grow as time went by. Every time Reno and Vincent walked in the school corridor, there were always people talking about them. Even some of them didn't believe that Vincent would marry Reno, when in fact Vincent already knew that Reno's status was just a low servant. Even not infrequently people who liked Vincent chose to withdraw, because those girls realized that Reno couldn't be their rival, because after Reno turned into a female figure, he became even more beautiful and made everyone mesmerized by his beauty. Even pure women admitted it. The trust given by the kingdom to Reno made everyone envious and jealous, especially the kingdom gave a badge to Reno where it was a sign that Reno had great merit to the kingdom. Everyone also already knew that Reno had loyally become Vincent's servant, especially the rumor about how Reno saved Vincent from the curse had spread and was heard by many people, so they chose to understand and surrender if in the end Reno and Vincent united. Reno's rescue made him fall into Vincent's embrace. The scene was very dramatic where Reno fainted in Vincent's embrace, if remembering that, and what would happen next if Reno engaged to Vincent. That never crossed his mind. Even now Reno could only cup his head tightly with his two small hands. Reno's expression was hard to read between happy and annoyed with what happened to him, especially many people always talked about Reno until making him sick. Now the school corridor that was usually quiet had horror energy for Reno because every time he walked, the whispers of school residents made his ears hot, but Reno couldn't fight like usual. Reno became more quiet. Reno also tried to avoid Vincent. He didn't want to meet the man for some time ahead, because if Vincent was always by his side, he became more restless, not knowing what to do. But no matter how far Reno tried to evade, and didn't want to meet Vincent, the man always suddenly came. Approaching him, even Vincent's presence seemed never readable by Reno, like now Vincent appeared from behind without giving a signal, until making Reno shocked and almost stumbled backward. Reno couldn't stay silent. His expression described everything. His heart pounded hard. It seemed he knew now Vincent's existence was a disaster for him because he had started to fall in love with the man, so to wake himself up Reno tried to slap his cheek very hard, and Reno's reaction like that made Vincent silent and wondered why the woman in front of him acted strange. Vincent saw how Reno acted strange in front of him. Even the girl openly knelt in front of Vincent. Of course Vincent didn't understand why the woman made jokes in front of him. But according to Reno's explanation, he was just a bit enthusiastic and full of determination to return to himself. Vincent could only smile. He didn't expect there was a funny side shown by Reno. And Vincent's sweet smile made Reno slam his body to the floor again. Obviously if Vincent was a bit worried, because it wasn't usual for Reno to act strange in front of him, but it seemed Reno didn't intend to be pretentious to Vincent. Even now, casually Reno stood and cursed Vincent, because the man still hadn't found a replacement for Reno as his servant. Every time Reno nagged made Vincent unable to move, because what the woman in front of him said was true. Only Vincent just couldn't trust others besides Reno, because according to Vincent, Reno was the right one to accompany him now. As usual, Reno had easily guessed Vincent's thoughts, even though Reno already knew to find a replacement for himself wasn't an easy matter, and for the umpteenth time Vincent's sweet words made Reno flustered, where Vincent said that he only needed Reno for now, because with Reno he could live full of laughter, and all that added the nervousness that spread in Reno's body. The man in front of him was very good at saying sweet things and making him flustered repeatedly. Even the blowing wind couldn't make Reno's body cold, because now he was very hot. His energy was drained, but only to fight Vincent. His plan to cure Vincent so he trusted women became a boomerang for Reno himself. He couldn't do his plan quickly, introducing Vincent to many female candidates he chose. The footsteps that had been firm started to weaken because Reno no longer had energy to speak. Time passed so quickly until it was time for Reno to return home just to rest from the fatigue of facing Vincent. But just as he nagged about the man's nature with him, Now Reno had to face several files whose stacks were so high. Now Reno didn't know what the contents of those letters were, but clearly he already knew that the arrival of those letters wasn't a good sign for him. Thousands of letters had been read by Reno. He was so overwhelmed facing the reality, because after school instead of resting, but reading stupid letters that made him even dizzier, where the contents of those letters were only apologies thrown by many men to him, and also letters from many women who supported if Reno engaged to Vincent, and that had made Reno annoyed because his chance to bring Vincent closer to women other than himself had started to thin. Almost no chance at all, but suddenly. There was one letter that made Reno a bit admiring, and that was a letter from a girl named Verdiana. Verdiana, who Reno knew, was a beautiful girl who was authoritative, and according to Reno, the girl was suitable to be candidate number 1 who would be Vincent's fiancée later. Of course, Reno felt happy because there was one who would be Vincent's partner and cure Vincent's hatred towards women. Reno was just about to be happy because he found Vincent still had female admirers, but Reno's happiness was only short because when he talked with the woman, he was thrown back to earth because Verdiana chose to give up on her admiration for Vincent. What could he do? Reno no longer had hope for Vincent, or perhaps he was destined not to be far from the man. The surge of anger, chaotic thoughts made Reno unable to turn his brain anymore. Reno couldn't let himself continue to be bound to Vincent, so he asked Verdiana, the woman in front of him, not to give up on Vincent, especially according to Reno. Verdiana was a suitable woman for Vincent, so Reno would try to bring them closer no matter how. The determination that was already so firm couldn't be destroyed, just like that, so Reno chose to leave the girl who was talking to him about Vincent, because he would tell the man that there was a woman who admired Vincent, and the woman was very suitable to be Vincent's life companion. Meanwhile, on the other side, Verdiana gave up on her feelings for Vincent not because of anything, because she saw with her own eyes that Reno dared to sacrifice himself to protect Vincent while Verdiana couldn't do that. That's why Verdiana couldn't guarantee that she would win the fight to win Vincent's heart from Reno. Meanwhile, now Reno was in a hurry because he was so happy and wanted to convey that Vincent still had a chance to marry a woman who loved him. In a different place without Reno's knowledge, Vincent had been called by his parents. The man always acted friendly, knocking on the door to enter his father and mother's workroom. The summoning of Vincent this time was of course to meet his father the king, namely King Louis, and his mother Queen Eileen. The family meeting was of course important, because usually Vincent's parents didn't call him suddenly, and it turned out the man's guess was right. There was very shocking news where the figure who cursed Reno into a woman and was sentenced asked for leniency on the punishment he received, and of course to reduce the punishment, the figure who enchanted Reno gave a gift in the form of a curse cancellation ring. Of course that was a very important thing, but Vincent felt there was something strange, and he didn't understand why only now the person gave the ring that had a spell to cancel Reno's magic. Currently there was a feeling of disappointment in Vincent's heart. He didn't want if Reno returned to change form into a male figure who always became a friend for Vincent. Seeing the child's expression, of course King Louis knew about it. Queen Eileen and King Louis gave a choice to Vincent. Everything was in the hands of their son because honestly they didn't mind if Vincent married Reno because they knew how sincere Reno was towards Vincent, especially Reno was a cute girl. The three of them considered everything, and of course Vincent thought the same. Vincent remembered how Reno wanted to return to his original body, but because Reno knew he couldn't return to being a male woman, he just resigned, and that's why Vincent became hesitant for now. If Vincent's decision was to make Reno a woman completely, then the king and queen would keep secret that they had gotten the antidote from the curse that befell Reno. Clearly everything was Vincent's decision. Remembering how desperate Reno was made Vincent unable to bear. The man quickly made a decision and told his parents that he wanted to make Reno return to being a man. All those needs he made because he wanted to make Reno happy. Meanwhile, in a different place, Reno nagged while running. He didn't accept if the candidate, who would be Vincent's partner, withdrew because of him. Realizing there was no resistance done by people because Reno and Vincent would hold the engagement made Reno even more anxious. His mind had been chaotic from the beginning. Thinking about how Reno later would become a princess for Vincent made him have to turn his brain because he wanted to accompany Vincent and not make the man feel burdened by his presence. Reno was lost in his thoughts this time because no matter how hard Reno avoided, Vincent always came to meet him. Vincent boldly stated that he would take full responsibility for Reno's life, even when Reno had become a woman. Vincent bravely said that he would marry Reno if no one wanted to be with Reno. Remembering that made Reno nervous. He even went to great lengths to ask for help from the girls he knew. But something happened where those girls chose to withdraw, not wanting to be with Vincent because Reno had become the man's. The image of Vincent stating that Reno was an important part of his life made Reno slowly surrender. It seemed he had fallen into Vincent's embrace willingly. Meanwhile, in a different room, Vincent was still discussing the curse that Reno had received on his behalf. The king had considered all the decisions, and the king left it all to his son. Vincent could only be silent. His mind was, so that he often asked himself whether Reno could change back into a man. This time, when Reno was about to walk looking for Vincent whom he hadn't met yet, suddenly there was a strange voice calling him. It was clear in Reno's ears that there was a male figure stating that he loved Reno. Reno paused for a moment. He digested everything he heard because he was afraid what he heard was a mistake. But in fact it really happened where two men Reno knew came approaching him. The two men were named Braun and Lai. The two men came approaching Reno and confessed their feelings. Reno was just shocked seeing the two male figures he knew were the son of the prime minister and a knight. Even they were quite close to him, so why did the two men come to meet him? That was a signature for Reno, especially since they said they liked Reno. Then for a while Reno's confusion started to bear fruit, where it turned out the two men wanted to ask for his help, and of course hearing that made Reno's heart seem to stop beating, because usually those important people didn't approach Reno, because basically Reno didn't interact much with them. Truly Reno didn't understand what happened. Why did the people around Vincent make him confused? Especially their sudden arrival. Because many men approached Reno, it made him hear rumors that he was cheating on Vincent. Another thing that made Reno feel frustrated was that people who should have left the world were living peacefully and coming to approach him. The gathering of handsome men was clearly visible in front of the eyes where the men introduced themselves to Vincent with the aim of making themselves Vincent's loyal servants, and of course Vincent didn't mind that. He always sat in his majestic chair while digesting every word from the candidates who would be chosen by him, or perhaps none would be chosen at all because for him Reno was never replaceable. The arrogant figure shown by Vincent made the candidates who would become his servants only able to be silent, not daring to move. Even there was no resistance to Vincent at all until that was seen by Reno. Every time he planned to approach Vincent with the girls or candidates to replace Reno as his servant never went smoothly. The man's cold nature made everyone afraid, and only Reno could conquer Vincent unexpectedly. This time Reno really didn't know what to do anymore. He could only slap his forehead because his mind was empty. Facing Vincent made Reno's energy drained and almost exhausted. Truly before Reno had said to Vincent that the man should act a little gentle to his prospective servant later, but it seemed Reno's effort to remind Vincent didn't go well because the proof was the man still acted arrogant and haughty. Reno saw that currently Vincent couldn't be disturbed, so he decided to see Vincent from afar. Perhaps the man's mood was not good, and he had many thoughts, so that made Vincent's nature change to colder than usual. Even he freely opposed the men in front of him who would become his servants later. Reno was again made amazed. The piercing words thrown by Vincent to his prospective servants made Reno silent, because without Reno's knowledge Vincent appreciated him so much and admitted that Reno was the figure he needed the most. The four men who introduced themselves to Vincent could only be stunned, while Reno was silent without any reaction. This time Reno couldn't contain his anger seeing Vincent's arrogant attitude. That's why he decided to suddenly appear and shout that he himself was not competent, because basically what Vincent wanted was not fully known by Reno, and all that reality must be known by Vincent, because occasionally Reno also felt tired towards Vincent. Braun tried to make Reno realize that in fact Reno was very valuable to Vincent, because many men had tried to approach Reno to become his servant, but Vincent seemed to challenge them. Reno's existence was so meaningful to Vincent, and Braun knew that especially Reno had been friends with Vincent for a long time, and wherever Vincent went there was always Reno accompanying, so Reno's role was very important to Vincent. That's why everyone acknowledged how good Reno was for the prince. Vincent's popularity that was so perfect to be a prince was not separated from Reno's important role, who always put his body on the line, so that Vincent was acknowledged by many people and looked good in the eyes of his followers. As if feeling slapped, Reno couldn't let Vincent be alone anymore. He had to make the man realize that this time Reno was not the figure who was always with him to be a servant, so Reno dared to block Vincent's path and try to interact with the male figure. Reno's sudden arrival certainly made Vincent confused. Reno suddenly gave a lecture to Vincent, so that Vincent didn't need to be too rude to his prospective servant. Reno actually knew that if Vincent had such high standards, but of course Reno hoped Vincent could act more gently, because no matter what, Vincent couldn't do some things alone, so the man needed a servant as his companion if he expected Reno. For a long time, everything had changed since Reno was cursed into a woman. Reno, with full courage, placed his 2 small hands on Vincent's broad shoulders, then shook them, so that Vincent focused on listening to all his words. Basically, making Vincent aware of his choice was the hardest thing for Reno, so he tried to touch the man's heart, who said that the men who were now with Vincent were not figures who could be underestimated just like that. They would always help Vincent later if Vincent needed help, because working alone was not possible. Vincent needed a partner to do complicated things if done alone, and of course they would become very important allies for Vincent later. The people in front of Vincent were, indeed, not competent people, but they would always be by Vincent's side. That's why Reno wanted Vincent to open his mind that he needed a friend besides Reno, perhaps? Or that was just Reno's alibi. He was also afraid if the men in front of Vincent would only become despicable flatterers. Yeah, what could be said if Vincent was indeed hard to trust people, so Reno decided to stay by Vincent's side, and Vincent didn't need to bother looking for Reno's replacement. "I will stay with you." Reno's words echoed in Vincent's ears, sounding sweet and calming, especially the girl's expression made Vincent's heart warm. He didn't expect that Reno would speak gently like that. Meanwhile, when Reno was talking with Vincent, there were always people disturbing their romance. The people who had just been intimidated by Vincent now changed direction. They expressed their thanks because they had been defended by Reno, and a few moments later Reno felt relieved if he succeeded in erasing Vincent's negative contents in front of many people. Braun and Lai acknowledged how great Reno was, who could calm the room's contents that were initially hot because of Vincent's arrogant nature. Even they really regretted if Reno had to leave the political world because of his form change. Many things had happened, and now Reno realized his mistake because he said that he would always be by Vincent's side, and that made Vincent treat him a little differently, and now Reno was curious whether his heartfelt expression could be understood by Vincent. Until in Reno's reverie, he was awakened when Vincent said that he had an important discussion that had to be conveyed to Reno, and that made Reno's heart pound. Vincent's serious facial expression this time was different from usual, as if their conversation would have a big impact later. After some quite mature considerations, Vincent decided to tell what he had discussed with his parents, and this time Vincent pulled Reno from many people. He wanted to express his heart, where Vincent would talk about important things to Reno. Truly, when hearing Vincent say that the man wanted to express something serious made his heart pound hard. He even was silent for a while because he wanted to focus on Vincent's words to him, but all that failed because many people barged into their conversation and cut off Vincent's words just like that. Clearly this time Reno was made angry. His soul as Vincent's servant rebelled and gave a warning to the men who had barged in and cut off Vincent's conversation to him. Enough already, Vincent could only slap his forehead. He was tired because even speaking he was no longer able. The important conversation between Vincent and Reno shouldn't be interrupted, but this time Vincent chose to understand the people around him, so Vincent asked what they were excited about because they were looking for Reno all over the school. Of course, hearing Vincent's approval made the men who were chasing Reno express their hearts that they wanted to invite the woman to have a tea party, especially when knowing that Reno had a big impact on Vincent, and they wanted Reno to approve their request, just to have fun together. Especially the women who chased Vincent had declared that they lost to Reno, and that was the reason the men gave respect to Reno. This time Reno was the one made confused. The arrival of the men surrounding him was not without reason. They just wanted Reno to be a matchmaker for those men, because they knew that Reno had talked to many women to be matched with Vincent, but the women who had met Reno chose to give up. Because hearing that a group of those men wanted Reno to promote them to the girls, of course, when hearing the words from the group of men, made Reno shocked, even almost stumbled, because he didn't expect that. This would have a big impact on him. Silent. This was Reno's mind that was made chaotic because his action of promoting Vincent to the girls and rejected by all became a big disaster for himself. Reno tried to refuse because he knew every man in his school was a noble with a decent social position, while the girls he wanted to introduce to Vincent were from the upper-class nobles, where basically Reno didn't have the right to hold a tea party and become a matchmaker for the men in front of him. Holding a luxurious tea party alone was impossible for Reno, not a matter of cost. He just didn't have the energy to invite many people, but it seemed the men in his school didn't care. Even they would find a solution to bear everything, even including the cost, and of course all that determination was read perfectly by Reno. Braun, who was also beside Reno, gave his incitement to the woman, because if Reno approved the request from the men in his school, perhaps that was a big opportunity for Reno as Vincent's fiancé, so that Vincent could be known by many people, and he himself of course had more benefits, because if Vincent was known well by people, then Vincent's chance to become the successor was bigger. If thought about, Braun's words were indeed true until Reno's stance almost wavered, then the stance collapsed. Reno had thought long. He decided to approve the men's request to make a tea party. This time Reno was the most enthusiastic. The men's request he would discuss with his father, and hearing that made Vincent also intervene. The man said that he would finance Reno's tea party plan. A tea party sponsored by the royal family. Wasn't that sounding great? That's why Reno became very enthusiastic. He even thanked Vincent because the man had supported his event, and of course, when hearing that Vincent was a little shy, he even held back from acting flustered. The men who met Reno also expressed their thanks. They even gave respect to Reno, and also Vincent, and said that they would always support whatever Reno did later. A little teasing alone made Reno flustered. The woman was hard to argue again about her relationship with Vincent, especially when she was teased by one of the men that her relationship with Vincent was so clearly that they were a pair of lovers. Reno just tried to explain because according to him, Vincent did that not because of love, just a sense of responsibility towards Reno, who had become Vincent's forefront guard, so Vincent intended to return to guard Reno. Of course, all those expressions appeared because Reno didn't want people to misunderstand him or Vincent. This time there was something strange. Unusually, Vincent was just silent. Usually the man talked the most, so many people around him felt strange, even Reno just realized it. The girl thought that Vincent was not fine. Reno tried to wake Vincent from his daze. He even casually checked Vincent's condition, while on the other hand the man's heart pounded hard without Reno knowing. Vincent stared deeply at how Reno was very worried about his condition. Love to overcome the nervousness in his heart, Vincent chose to look like a man spreading his charm until Reno couldn't say anything. After all that happened, now Reno together with Vincent were in their private room where they were designing an invitation for the tea party that would be held. Reno was certainly nervous because this was the first time he held a luxurious tea party and invited nobles with levels above him. Reno wanted everything to look perfect, even though now the girl was confused herself because her role was so important. Vincent knew that Reno was overwhelmed, that's why now he always accompanied Reno, even asked Reno to cancel his party, because he couldn't bear to see Reno become dizzy, but the girl was certainly not as weak as Vincent thought. Moreover, now Reno's status, known by many people, was Vincent's fiancé, so he had to carry out this tea party perfectly, so as not to damage Vincent's reputation in front of everyone. Usually Vincent talked a lot, but this time the man chose to be silent, and of course all could be read by Reno. The girl thought that Vincent was sad lately, so Reno thought to entertain Vincent, even though he didn't know how, but later if he tried it certainly wasn't wrong. Perhaps a little teasing Vincent would be an entertainer for the man, because that was all that was in Reno's mind now. Without thinking long at all, Reno started to embrace Vincent into his hug. Automatically, without Vincent realizing, he had fallen into Reno's embrace. The hug felt soft and warm, even full of calmness, and that made Vincent feel enchanted. The man was silent for a moment, digesting what happened between him and Reno. Truly calming for Vincent. Behind his chaotic mind, there was so much attention he received from Reno. All expressions of consolation, and Reno's hug slightly warmed Vincent's heart. The man just chose to be silent. He tried to neutralize his heart and mind. Behind Vincent's silence, there were so many heavy burdens carried by his shoulders, and this time suddenly Vincent pulled himself from Reno's embrace. This time he was already so firm with his heart. Vincent tried to stare deeply at the woman in front of him, as if he wanted to convey something serious that had been interrupted by people. Truly this time everything felt heavy for Vincent, but he couldn't hide it from Reno. That's why Vincent tried to make Reno realize that he knew there was a way that could make Reno a real man again. And of course, when the statement came out of Vincent's mouth made Reno silent for a moment, then his laughter turned bitter, because what Reno knew, he wouldn't be able to change into a man again, according to the priest's statement, who had checked his condition. Especially the curse magic that befell Reno couldn't be cancelled. Reno's mind this time was chaotic. Originally, Reno really wanted to be a man again, but why only now? Vincent said that there was a way to return Reno, even though Reno himself had accepted if he could no longer return to being a man, because what he cared about was only Vincent, where he would always be by Vincent's side no matter what happened. Vincent's desire this time was Reno's desire too, because Reno couldn't refute the words of the man in front of him, so whatever Vincent's decision was a form of the decision Reno chose. Happily, Vincent was so enthusiastic. He asked Reno to return to being a man like before, and hearing that made Reno shocked in disbelief. Returning to being a man. Perhaps this would happen soon, but there was a feeling of disappointment that appeared in Reno's heart. Truly strange, this time Reno felt something strange inside him. He suddenly became a different person, and indeed magically Reno, who originally had a female form, suddenly changed into a male figure, just like Reno's original form. Reno was shocked. He didn't expect what he saw, even he made sure that everything he experienced wasn't a dream, and of course it indeed wasn't a dream, because Vincent secretly slipped the curse antidote ring for Reno. Vincent explained that the ring couldn't break Reno's curse, but only the ring could ward off the curse received by Reno if Reno always wore the ring. Truly, Reno felt his body enchanted again. He didn't think that this would happen to him again, because it was clear that Reno heard the priest's statement that his curse couldn't be cancelled, and today surprisingly Reno changed into a man, even though not completely, because to maintain Reno's current physique, he had to always wear the ring. Enough, Reno could only be silent. He made sure that his body had really changed into a man. Occasionally Reno also looked at the ring given by Vincent. A feeling of guilt certainly spread in Vincent's blood, because he didn't tell Reno that he had gotten the antidote for the curse that befell Reno. Of course that made him feel guilty, and now Vincent lowered his self-esteem to apologize to Reno, but Reno didn't mind that. He didn't want Vincent to feel guilty about him, because whatever happened it was all Reno's responsibility as Vincent's servant and friend. Reno now had officially returned to his former self. There was a feeling of disappointment, but there was also relief in his heart, because all the acting he did now had ended, and of course he was no longer Vincent's fiancée. How happy Vincent's heart was when his doubt now bore sweet fruit. Reno had returned to himself, and of course Reno had been free from the shadow if he was Vincent's fiancée. Vincent did that because he didn't want Reno to feel burdened, so he chose to make Reno free from the shackles of the shadow as his fiancée. On the other hand, Reno could only bow his gaze when hearing that he was given leave by Vincent to recover as a man. This time Reno realized that in the end what Vincent wanted was Reno's figure as a man, and Reno was also like that. Perhaps he didn't have a chance anymore as Reno's lover. Reno's long sigh was only heard by himself. It felt returning to being a man made him feel there was something stuck in his heart, but of course Reno couldn't protest, because initially he also insisted on becoming a man back to his nature. After the change in himself, Reno now really returned to a male figure. He even looked at himself from the mirror reflection, as if making sure what happened wasn't a dream. The leave given by Vincent, he also utilized well, while sipping the tea in his hand. The change obtained by Reno didn't make him happy, because originally he thought that he would be a woman for the rest of his life, but when Vincent's statement asked him to change back into a male figure, that made him feel burdened. He always asked why Vincent really wanted to change him back. The tea that was originally brewed by Reno he started to slam until the water splashed out of the glass. He could only express his annoyance at that cup of tea. Reno screamed hysterically. He was very annoyed at Vincent. Yes, indeed, he could change into a man, but in fact if Reno removed the ring, he would return to being a woman, and that would be very confusing until in the end wouldn't Reno still marry? Just thinking about it made Reno feel sad. Perhaps Vincent didn't want to take responsibility for him. The deep sadness couldn't hold back Reno's tears. The tears pooling in Reno's eyelids started to spill by themselves. Realizing that only Reno wanted his marriage to happen with Vincent made him feel disappointed. Reno felt he was really stupid for imagining impossible things happening. The marriage said by Vincent was only as a formality, because secretly Vincent looked for a way so that Reno could return to being a man. There was a feeling of sadness and disappointment, even all those feelings couldn't be expressed by Reno. Reno could only clench his fist, squeezing the pants he was wearing until making it wrinkled. Reno squeezed his head. He bowed dizzy sitting alone in an empty room, then remembering how people supported his relationship with Vincent. Many of them speculated that Vincent loved him, especially when people saw Vincent's sweet treatment to Reno made them very sure that Reno's marriage with Vincent would happen. It was all just a matter of time, but in the end it was only Reno's wishful thinking, because Vincent preferred Reno, who was a man rather than a woman. With many considerations to protect his and Vincent's self-esteem, Reno chose for the next day not to wear the curse antidote ring. Proven when he returned to school, Reno didn't wear it. Of course, he was still a woman until his meeting with Vincent made Vincent wonder why Reno didn't wear the ring. Of course, Reno tried to evade that he would remain the same. The atmosphere that was already chaotic because of his change had made him so dizzy, especially if Reno chose his initial form to be a man. Then there would be even more chaos, therefore he would remain as when he got the curse. To avoid conversation about Reno's decision, Reno chose to change the topic about the partners they would match at the tea party event. Even everyone also already knew that Reno was Vincent's fiancé, so it didn't matter for Reno if he decided to remain in the curse. The quite intense conversation between Vincent and Reno. This time Vincent didn't want Reno to sacrifice himself, because basically Reno had sacrificed a lot for him, so Vincent asked Reno to think carefully about his decision, especially Reno could return to his original form thanks to the ring given by the sorcerer. Regarding the problem of people who would think negative and cause chaos, everything would be handled by Vincent. The gentleman's expression from the man made Reno melt. No matter how much he thought Vincent was very cool, especially when the man smiled. Aware of whatever Vincent said made Reno think that Vincent was so sincere to him, not thinking about Reno's position, because Vincent only tried everything for Reno, and Vincent was really his best friend. Enough already. Reno didn't want to argue anymore with his change or his decision to be a woman, because now he already knew how sincere Vincent was to him, so Reno with all his might tried to divert the topic to the decision he made. Reno became a woman because of his change at the wrong time, especially he would hold a tea party to match the partners later, and he had also promised to his school friends, and it was impossible for Reno to cancel it all. There was nothing wrong with Reno's expression. Everything was indeed true and unavoidable, so Vincent followed Reno's plan because all couldn't be avoided. If seen from Vincent's facial expression, the man was a little relieved. There was a small smile on his lips when finding that Reno happily accepted his current condition. A week before the tea party started, Reno had started to be busy. He went back and forth to make sure that the location, decoration, type of dishes that would be served at the tea party, all managed by Reno himself, of course, with the help of several vendors appointed by the royal family. All room management, according to Reno's wishes. Of course, the grand party shouldn't find a little flaw because that would damage Vincent's image. So busy Reno, when approaching the tea party he would hold, but a little happiness also appeared in his heart, because some servants who cooperated with Reno started teasing him, where they were so jealous seeing the ring attached to Reno's finger, all that indicated that Vincent was serious with his relationship with Reno. Reno's busy days had passed. Now it was time for the tea party to start. Many things had happened, and this time Reno remembered that there was Verdiana's figure, who hadn't decided the engagement plan with Vincent, because if remembering Reno could already change into a man, this was an opportunity for him, so Reno decided to meet Verdiana. He would tell all the situations that happened, and Reno, of course, had to reveal that he could already change into a man. If all Reno's expressions and honesty could be accepted by Verdiana, and Verdiana advanced to be Vincent's fiancé candidate, Reno didn't need to bother looking for a partner again for Vincent, and he didn't mind being a man again according to his original form before the curse. Reno, who ran to approach Verdiana with the aim of conveying good news to the girl, but his steps suddenly stopped when Verdiana turned to him. Reno was stunned for a while. Now Reno, who was made nervous when Verdiana asked if there was something wrong. Reno was silent, then spontaneously evaded if there was nothing to worry about. Now Reno understood. Verdiana already had a firm decision to start giving up on Vincent, even though it was only a temporary assumption. Reno didn't know what to do anymore. If he revealed the truth about himself, who could change into a man, then there would be some changes. This couldn't happen. Reno would create chaos, and Vincent would be labeled as a same-sex lover if this happened. Now everything was already too chaotic for Reno and Vincent. Reno panicked, this time his body like struck by lightning. He held his head, slapping the head. Reno didn't expect that he had been disqualified as Vincent's servant, and he considered himself no longer useful. If that happened, all Reno's efforts would be in vain. Now his condition was already complicated. If Reno acted rashly, perhaps Vincent would hate and expel him. Just imagining that happening made him already starting to dizzy. The feeling of hesitation started to envelop Reno. He didn't know what to do anymore. The beautiful dress he wore made him feel much more difficult. If all things were no longer according to his plan, anymore wouldn't that be a bad thing? And Reno didn't want that to happen, so this he put back on the ring given by Vincent that could change Reno into a male figure. Reno had felt enough. Reno was faced with a very heavy choice. He even hated himself for daring to like Vincent. This time Reno's decision was firm. He would stop from all things that made his heart difficult, or perhaps he would fall deeper. Vincent's charm made him drunk and thirsty for love. The atmosphere at that time had started to be crowded. The tea party plan that Reno made was attended by many people. The party was really grand, even all the decorations in the room were so elegant and neatly arranged. Reno didn't expect that all the preparations he did bore sweet fruit, but he realized one thing. He once mocked a matchmaking party, but now he was the one creating the party even more grand. It felt Reno started to feel guilty for his treatment to the host before, because basically making a party was so tiring. After observing the many people who came to carry out the matchmaking search, suddenly Reno was approached by several men where they expressed gratitude because Reno's figure had helped them to hold a tea party. More precisely, a matchmaking search party. In the many conversations that happened, the main character from the beauty goddess had come, Verdiana. The woman walked gracefully. She was so beautiful with the dress and accessories on her head worn by her, and all eyes were on her. Verdiana stepped full of determination. The beautiful woman walked with full confidence. She even ignored the screams of the men who admired her. Verdiana's beauty that was so captivating made Reno withdraw. He didn't believe he could talk to the girl, even though there were many things he wanted to express by Reno at the tea party, but it seemed all that would be difficult because the girl had been surrounded by many men first. Verdiana's popularity was truly unmatched. On the other hand, Vincent had observed Reno's movements, who looked a bit restless with the many people. Vincent, who was quite sensitive, approached Reno. The man wanted Reno to always be by his side because he didn't want Reno alone, so he asked Reno to stay by his side and not go anywhere. Then that made Reno just follow Vincent's words because he had started to realize he had to obey all Vincent's words. Being alone with Vincent now made Reno awkward. He even couldn't speak. His lips hung automatically because too nervous. Truly, everything changed to awkward, and Reno regretted his own actions because his carelessness made love grow for his own friend. Reno was dragged by Vincent to stay away from the crowd of many people because he wanted to speak seriously to Reno. Vincent warned Reno to immediately make a decision because if it continued to drag on, Vincent was worried later Reno would no longer be able to change back to his original self. Vincent's words only got a cynical glance from Reno, but if Reno returned to being a man, he had to first win Verdiana's heart, so that the woman wanted to fight back for Vincent as her lover. But on the other hand, after Reno changed into a woman, he fell in love with Vincent. Even he was reluctant to return to his original form, but of course that couldn't be expressed by Reno because he was too shy. He was afraid if Vincent knew he had fallen in love with his childhood friend. Vincent understood all the things Reno had gone through, so he asked Reno not to worry about his father's opinion or Reno's father if later they chose another path. It was true the curse received by Reno hadn't completely disappeared, but at least now it would be better for Reno if Reno wanted to change himself back to his original form. Still, Vincent's persuasion became hard to refute because all his words were true. Reno's mind became chaotic again because Vincent's words he couldn't answer. All Vincent's words started to echo in Reno's mind. Now Reno started to realize that Vincent didn't want his current self. Perhaps Vincent felt troubled having to take responsibility for Reno. That day, that second, Reno no longer wanted to listen to Vincent. He would stick to his own stance. He didn't care how Vincent thought about him later. Vincent actually didn't mind if Reno later made a decision to change into a man. Even he really wanted his friend not to be sad because of his change, but it seemed now Reno had enjoyed his role as Vincent's fiancé, especially this time Reno had thrown all his grievances to Vincent and yelled at the man that all decisions were in Reno's own hands, especially when Vincent knew that Reno's annoyance was because of his own actions. In Reno's mind, if Vincent didn't push him to treat Reno romantically and make Reno aroused to fall in love with Vincent, perhaps Reno could easily make a decision to return to being a man, but all that had been shaken by Vincent himself. Reno really started to fall in love with his friend, and he was reluctant to let Vincent go just like that. The anger that had piled up for so long had been channeled. This time it was Reno's turn to ignore Vincent, but suddenly the man gently stroked the top of Reno's head until making Reno flustered alone. For the umpteenth time, Vincent's gentle actions made Reno's heart start to melt. How not? If Vincent treated him like a girl, it was impossible for Reno if he didn't love Vincent, because seen from any side Vincent was so cool as a man. To avoid his irregular heartbeat because of Vincent's treatment, Reno chose to leave without a word, leaving the male figure who made him flustered, and if thought about it would still be good for Reno if he was always by Vincent's side protecting the man with his own ability. This time Reno tried to compare himself with Verdiana. The girl's beauty made Reno feel envious, and he wanted to compete with the woman to get Vincent's heart, but he didn't know what way to do to make Vincent also fall in love with him. If thought about, actually there was one way, but the action was a little not good to imitate. Dirty thoughts with all planned were clear. Reno still lost if compared to Verdiana. The feeling of frustration had enveloped Reno's mind. He was reluctant if Vincent had to hold hands with someone else besides him. His heart started to hurt. Reno didn't want Vincent taken over by Verdiana. Imagining Vincent's sweet treatment and calm smile would anchor to a girl like Verdiana made Reno sad. Truly, Reno didn't want Vincent to fall into another woman's hands, so he decided to express his feelings to Vincent. He didn't care later if he would be rejected, but for the umpteenth time the courage started to shrink when Reno imagined Vincent's words, who said that he had to return to being a man like before. Honestly, actually, Reno was afraid of being rejected, but he would also feel defeated if he didn't express his feelings to Vincent, so he chose to approach Vincent and wanted to be honest to the man. Again, Reno lost. Vincent's words, who asked him to be a man he could only obey. The tea party this time went so enjoyably. People always welcomed the main peak of the party. Arrival after arrival always appeared at Reno's house. This time the atmosphere also started to become busy. Many people went here and there exploring the party room. Even Reno also looked overwhelmed, because he also had to welcome one by one his guests who came. Reno started exploring the corridor of his house. He seemed to be looking for something missing from his sight. Reno looked a bit panicked because he had been circling his party for a long time. He didn't see the person he was looking for. Truly, with such a complicated dress, Reno was willing to explore every crevice of the room to find the whereabouts of the person he loved. Reno's steps this time were certain. He had no doubt at all in himself. Even every stomp of the foot sounded so loud and clear. Reno's firm attitude started to be shown. Reno's sharp gaze had described how firm the determination he had pondered. Reno was looking for Vincent. He couldn't stand it anymore because the man was not sensitive to his feelings, so Reno wanted to return the ring given by Vincent, where the ring could make Reno return to being a man if wearing it. Already made to fall in love, it was impossible for Reno to return to his original form, so he decided on an extreme thing and affirmed his feelings to Vincent, his friend. Reno would confess that during he became a woman, and due to Vincent's so gentle attitude towards him made Reno start to grow feelings of like towards Vincent, and that couldn't be thrown away. Just like that, so he had decided one thing that changed his life, namely Reno would remain a woman and accompany Vincent. After quite a long time circling the building, finally Reno found a bright spot of Vincent's whereabouts. He saw the man daydreaming, staring out the window. Of course, Reno didn't know what thoughts made Vincent have to daydream. Initially, Reno's steps were more certain, but when seeing Reno's gloomy face made his steps stop for a moment, he looked back deeply at Vincent's face silhouette. Clearly, the man looked perfect in his eyes. One call from Reno's soft voice didn't make Vincent turn. He was still focused on his gaze, staring out the window with various thoughts that who knows where. A cold gaze full of sadness, that was what Reno saw when he looked deeply at Vincent's figure. His call for the umpteenth time made Reno nervous again, because Vincent was always to the point where he seemed to read Reno's mind. Apparently Vincent knew that Reno was looking for him because there was something to discuss, and of course that wasn't off because basically Reno wanted to say something serious. Slowly Reno stepped. He bravely faced Vincent while looking at the man sadly, while Vincent only saw Reno coldly. As if his mouth was silenced, Reno's mind started to be chaotic again. He had determined that at that moment he wouldn't obey Vincent's orders, and whatever happened Reno was ready to accept it, so he tried to take a breath, arranging his thoughts and arranging his heartbeat, so as not to be afraid of the decision he would make. Reno started to make his voice. He was really nervous until his words became stuttered. Ring. Reno tried to say that he would return the ring given by Vincent. Enough for Reno to hold all the complaints in his heart, so he had felt whatever if later Vincent would be angry at him, but when Reno discussed the ring with a stuttered voice, Vincent just listened silently. Then surprisingly, the man also heard that Reno would return the curse antidote ring that had been hard-earned obtained by the royal family. On the other hand, Reno's courage had clearly described that he had made a decision to become a woman completely, and that's why he also wanted to be by Vincent's side no matter what happened. Truly, all beyond expectations, Reno's effort to show his feelings to Vincent was directly refuted by the man. He even loudly said for Reno to return to being a man, and of course Vincent's words made Reno heartbroken, as if his feelings never existed and weren't felt by Vincent. Reno could only bow sluggishly, but he kept trying to convince Vincent even with a trembling voice. This time Vincent was really scary. The man's sharp gaze made Reno scared, especially when Vincent made a voice and said that Reno had dared to oppose his orders. Of course, Reno wasn't completely opposing Vincent's desire to change him back into a man, but if thought about, Reno could no longer do it, especially when he had fallen in love with his friend. Reno's body weakened, sluggish, and like having no energy to face Vincent. The rejection blow said by Vincent made Reno reflect on his actions, but if thought about, Reno wanted Vincent to speak openly to him, or vice versa. Reno wanted to express all the grievances he had harbored so far. The pain when hearing Vincent, who asked him firmly to change himself, made Reno's chest tighter. He held the pain in his heart. Reno even wanted to speak openly with Vincent. He hoped Vincent also did the same. But everything could only spin in Reno's mind, because in fact he chose to be silent, burying all the feelings that existed. Reno was angry. He showed all his annoyance to Vincent, because the man didn't want to listen to his explanation why he wanted to give the ring to Vincent. But again, Vincent's words made Reno silent again. Reno was silent, and that was realized by Vincent, so the man also felt guilty because he was too hard on Reno. He could only exhale roughly because he had said bad to Reno. A few moments full of silence until finally Reno got an answer from Vincent why the man wanted Reno to return to his original form to be a man, because basically Vincent didn't want to hurt Reno. And those words were very clear, heard in Reno's ears, especially now he saw how Vincent squeezed his own head, because he was so annoyed because Reno didn't understand his thoughts. Reno was silent for some time. He was lost in his own thoughts. Reno was startled. His inner self felt struck. He just knew that Vincent's rejection of him wasn't because Vincent hated or didn't like him. But this time Reno didn't want to give up. He would still fight for what had become his choice, so Reno chose to kneel. He explained all his grievances to Vincent, why he didn't want to accept the ring given by Vincent, which the ring could change him into a male figure. With that firmness, Reno gripped the ring tightly and tried to hand it to Vincent. Already repeatedly Vincent asked Reno to wear the curse antidote ring, but repeatedly Reno didn't obey his orders, so Vincent tried to confirm whether all that was the right choice for Reno, and of course with very firmness Reno answered all Vincent's questions that this all was the firm decision Reno wanted. The grip of the ring in Reno's hand had explained everything, where Reno would hand the ring to Vincent. As if the air became stuffy, Reno, who had felt his body weak, suddenly collapsed, and the ring in his grip fell to the floor. Seeing how fragile Reno made Vincent worried and approached the girl. Reno couldn't stand it anymore. The tears dammed in his eyelids fell by themselves. Then he said that he had to be hidden by Vincent. He felt it didn't matter. He would still choose to be the bride for Vincent, who would stand beside the man. The words sounded like a confession of Reno's feelings, a confession with sobs and a trembling voice. The empty room was only filled by Reno and Vincent. Silence hit them again after Reno expressed his feelings, where he wanted to be Vincent's female bride. Reno realized perhaps that wouldn't happen, so he asked Vincent to forget all he said, then left the man while running without turning towards Vincent. Reno had tried his best to stay away, but Vincent suddenly pulled him until Reno fell into Vincent's embrace, and unexpectedly Vincent also poured out his heart that he would marry Reno, and there would be no one else after that. It felt all misunderstandings had happened between Reno and Vincent, where now when Vincent knew that Reno loved him, he honestly explained about his feelings. Reno was cursed because of him, and that's why Reno became a woman, so Vincent wanted to take responsibility for what happened. The human statement that suddenly made Reno's heart beat irregular, and he was stunned looking at the man in front of him. Vincent repeatedly expressed his heart. He explained that he would protect Reno even with his own life, so he firmly said that he would take responsibility for the umpteenth time, and in the end Vincent also liked Reno, and the fact where Vincent could still be a prince because of the support given by Reno. Vincent wanted Reno to always smile by his side. Actually, when Vincent found the curse antidote ring, he once thought to hide it from Reno, but if that happened he was a selfish person. If honest, Vincent wanted their relationship to remain like now. But he didn't know Reno's heart, so Vincent gave orders to Reno for him to change into a man. And the happiest thing was Reno also expressed his heart, where he accepted to remain a woman and love Vincent. All expressions from Vincent's heart had been heard by Reno. Even suddenly the man approached his lips and gently kissed Reno's forehead until making Reno's feelings warm again. Even Vincent also apologized to Reno because he once made Reno disappointed. Now everything was also clear. They apologized to each other for their respective egos. Vincent and Reno now had reconciled, but there was still no bright spot from their feelings, so Reno tried to clarify the situation where he loved Vincent as a man and he in position as a woman. Reno's confession was also replied by Vincent that he also loved the figure in front of him as a woman. The atmosphere that was initially awkward now changed to warm and romantic. The confession of the two humans explained that there must be one who dared to express feelings first, then we could know the feelings of the person we love. Another thing came so suddenly where Vincent for the umpteenth time begged for forgiveness to Reno. He even looked gently at the girl's eyes in front of him and said that he wanted to marry Reno. Reno was silent. He didn't move at all. The woman just looked at Vincent's figure because he didn't expect what Vincent said. The proposal that was so sudden said by Vincent made Reno silent for a moment until he realized and replied to the proposal with sweet words full of nervousness. Hearing his proposal accepted, of course, Vincent was happy and cheered greatly until making Reno shocked, and the ring in his grip was also forcibly taken by Vincent, and the man immediately threw the ring until it fell rolling to the floor. Vincent looked very handsome. The man with his gentlemanly threw away Reno's curse antidote ring and affirmed that he would give a much better ring to the girl in front of him. Truly the statement made Reno's cheeks red because of embarrassment, while Vincent just smiled gently because he already felt relieved because he had dared to state his feelings to Reno. For the first time, one gentle kiss on Reno's lips landed. Vincent kissed him so gently until a surprising thing happened where Vincent carried Reno while shouting that he would marry the girl in front of all who attended the tea party. Time passed so quickly. Now Reno and Vincent were officially engaged. They secretly had also planned a suitable wedding date. Even though there was a little tension from Reno because they were still students, but for Vincent that wasn't a problem. Reno realized his relationship with Vincent now had no challenges from anyone. They even got blessings from the people around them, and everything went smoothly for now. Speaking of when discussing marriage, Reno was still not ready if it happened so quickly, but Vincent tried to convince Reno, even though there were some disputes, until Reno decided to leave Vincent in their room, but mistakenly Reno's weak body, once pulled by Vincent, made him fall in front of the man. Vincent pinned Reno. The man was on top of Reno and prevented the girl's two hands, then said that they couldn't do things openly only after getting engaged. So Vincent decided for them to marry faster, so that their relationship could be seen by many people, even just holding hands in front of all people who saw them. That was Vincent's dream towards Reno. Reno started to realize that Vincent really loved him. Sincerely, even Vincent also admitted it. He had long loved Reno, as soon as Reno changed into a woman. Strangely, this time Reno felt much more nervous. Vincent's words, who said that he would still love Reno, even if Reno changed into a man. Even Vincent's silly thoughts started to spread throughout the man's body, where he wanted Reno to wear the curse antidote ring to prove how Vincent's feelings towards Reno. Thousands of deadly seductions that Vincent expressed to Reno made him even more in love. He saw how cool Vincent was even when he knew Vincent always said silly. Vincent's smile and the man's embrace made Reno even more flustered. It seemed Vincent's mind this time was not fine. He was still a normal man because when seeing Reno lying on the bed with a good body made his mind start to wander. He even shouted wanting to marry Reno as soon as possible, even right then. Vincent's statement that was so funny made Reno laugh. They even imagined seasons changing seasons when they became a couple later. There was a scary as well as funny aura shown by Vincent until making Reno laugh, because rarely did he see that Vincent sulked at him. In Reno's eyes, Vincent now was like a little child, so spontaneously Reno wanted to calm the heart of the man in front of him, starting to pull Vincent into his embrace. The embrace that was so deep and warm, as if Reno poured out his heart. This time Reno was the one who felt strange because they had been hugging for a long time, but Vincent still chose to be silent. This time Reno, who didn't understand what the man wanted. On the bed that was so soft, the long embrace between Reno and Vincent happened. Reno knew now Vincent was annoyed at him, because Reno instead didn't want to marry Vincent quickly, while Vincent's thoughts were the opposite of Reno. Reno tried to give understanding to Vincent, but the man still remained silent, not wanting to speak. He just listened to every Reno's statement about Reno's reason to postpone their marriage. Of course, Reno still thought that their marriage was too fast to be carried out, especially now they were still in school and being students, while on the other hand Vincent's father had just expanded their territory. If he had to remember back how they fell in love, of course when Reno changed into a woman because of the curse and several series of events made their bond start to form, and they both fell in love with each other and lived happily together, even they also planned to marry, but because there was a diplomatic event, so their wedding plan had to be postponed. Vincent was still reluctant to answer. He just muttered a little and even deepened his embrace to Reno. It felt Vincent was already fed up. He even thought that Reno didn't agree with their marriage. Vincent was just a little afraid if what they planned was cancelled, and that made his heart restless. Behind Vincent's restlessness this time was the one hugging Reno's small body. Vincent's embrace made Reno's heart melt. He imagined how cute when Vincent ignored him. If discussing marriage, of course Reno wasn't fine. He also wanted to marry Vincent soon, but of course that wasn't possible when their country wasn't fine, and Reno's statement was enough to relieve Vincent. Even the man's cheeks were made red, flushed due to flustered. Vincent felt relieved that it wasn't him alone who wanted to marry soon, but Reno also thought the same. Wasn't the atmosphere now so hot, so Vincent thought to add the existing romance. Reno's small body started to be slammed by Vincent onto the bed. He even gently gripped Reno's shoulder, then expressed his feelings how much he loved Reno, the girl in front of him. The sad, sharp gaze, as if asking for something, made Reno feel enchanted. Reno also expressed how much he loved Vincent because of the handsomeness possessed by the man. The embrace of the two lovers became tighter and so romantic. Even Reno's eyes showed a sign of love for Vincent without the slightest shame. Both were equally hot. They fell in love with each other. Almost the unwanted thing happened because both were equally close. Of course, Reno, who was formerly a former man, had been sensitive to Vincent's mind, so he tried to evade, so that they knew the limit before marriage happened. Clearly, Vincent felt annoyed. He even couldn't smile, and instead showed a cute facial expression. And the next day, Reno started walking around the city. He also met his friend, who he almost matched with Vincent, namely Verdiana. Reno friendly started waving his hand to Verdiana. Reno's friendly attitude made his interlocutor feel safe, and of course Reno's presence was realized by Verdiana. Reno and Verdiana met at the same place, where the place was a princess education place, before carrying out marriage. Clearly Reno didn't expect that Verdiana suddenly was proposed by a foreign prince. Their conversation was also quite warm, like friends who had interacted for a long time. And of course Reno felt happy when knowing that even now they took education as a princess together. If honest, Reno so admired Verdiana because he saw how graceful the woman in front of him, so Reno was obsessed to make Verdiana his role model. Hearing Reno's so sincere statement made Verdiana smile warmly. She knew if Reno's struggle wasn't easy to get Vincent's figure. Following the class as a princess indeed looked tiring. Reno became so busy, but for the future that would be run together with Vincent. The tiredness instead made him feel happy. Reno's smile bloomed just imagining his life together with Vincent, building a household ark. Reno started to be enthusiastic. He even showed how happy the days he passed. Reno also started to encourage Vincent to be able to try as best as possible to make their country better, because basically later they were the successors of the relay holders of the kingdom's power. It seemed Vincent had felt fed up with all the talks thrown by Reno about his role as a prince, so he chose to be silent, looking in any direction, as if not listening to Reno's words. It felt Reno was also fed up to nag Vincent, so he chose to be silent, and for some time Reno expressed that he also followed a princess class, so that later Vincent wasn't ashamed to stand with Reno in front of everyone. Learning to be a princess certainly wasn't easy. Occasionally Reno also felt dizzy, starting from learning how to serve a husband that had its own challenge for Reno, but when he said that he had learned how to serve a husband made him lose his mind, and asked Reno to practice it. Of course Reno was shocked beyond belief. There was no thing that made Reno's heart almost detach. He didn't think that Vincent would say such a thing, especially now it looked the man was so happy waiting for sweet treatment from Reno. Seeing how happy Vincent heard Reno's rapid change made Reno no longer able to argue. Because even avoiding Reno also couldn't, because Vincent who suddenly kissed his lips forcibly until their kiss became deeper and they were only in that comfortable feeling. Romantic position, warm embrace with a kiss that became deeper made Vincent and Reno even more lost in love romance. Almost their breath ran out. so the kiss had to stop switching to Vincent's words, who seemed to seduce Reno, asking Reno to serve him more. Vincent this time was like a wild man who wanted Reno. Reno was already hot, so he determined to surrender himself to the man he loved. Romantic night started. They passed together with a little conversation, where lately Vincent started to be busy with kingdom affairs, and their time together became not much. Vincent loved Reno very much, and that was proven when he gently kissed Reno's forehead, who was now in his embrace. Vincent also started to be honest if later he would be busier, because there was intercontinental diplomatic affairs. Reno realized with Vincent's words about their reduced time, but he was also happy, because the little time left made them miss each other and become more romantic. Almost Reno's brother fell faint, so Reno asked if he was fine. Of course Reno's brother was fine, as seen he was still able to stand upright. Actually Reno was a little worried about his brother, namely, because anyway they were very close. Reno's brother was named Baron. Basically Baron was the heir of Reno's family. He ruled a different region from Vincent. Truly, the hot scene done by Reno and Vincent made Baron's eyes stained. Baron never thought that a Reno was so extraordinary, because he had given high-level lessons for Vincent to become an adult man. How not? If Baron didn't forcibly open Reno's room door, perhaps other hot things could happen, and perhaps they could miss doing adult scenes that weren't time to do before marriage happened. Baron's status as Reno's brother formerly so spoiled Reno as his sibling, and Reno was often noticed by his brother. Even now Baron still occasionally met Reno, especially when he got news that his sibling Reno had changed into a woman. Baron tried to understand Reno. He could only praise how his sibling's change was so significant, even could make Vincent submit to him. Hearing many praises from his brother certainly made Reno feel proud. Meanwhile on the other side Vincent made small talk greeting Baron. He smiled warmly greeting Reno's brother. Baron understood his presence. Basically Baron was Vincent's subordinate, so he was very happy when Vincent asked about his presence. Baron also knelt in front of Vincent as an expression of his gratitude, because Vincent had poured attention to Baron as his trusted person. Baron's arrival wasn't without reason, because his presence that was very far from the capital made Baron late to get news that his sibling Reno had changed into a beautiful woman, so he had to confirm it himself and hurried to finish all his work, then headed to the kingdom's capital, and indeed the sibling he loved had changed into a beautiful woman. Actually there was a feeling of disappointment in Baron's heart, because anyway Reno was his sibling, but he felt a little relieved, even though there was an awkward feeling, when he knew that Vincent had officially engaged to Reno, his sibling. The shock was added with what was seen by Baron, where Reno did a hot scene with the prince. Meanwhile, responding to his brother's words, Reno could only laugh awkwardly. Remembering Reno's childhood made Baron nostalgic again, where formerly he carried his sibling, and said that Reno was his cutest male sibling, even like an angel, but now the reality had reversed. Reno had changed into a woman, plus he had engaged to the prince. Hearing the grievances from Baron made Vincent wonder if Baron objected to his relationship with Reno. Enough, this time Baron could only kneel. He didn't think his words were misunderstood by Vincent as the kingdom's prince. Seeing Baron kneel in front of Vincent made Reno hurriedly try to defend his brother and ask Vincent not to be hard on Baron. This time just wanted to make sure if his sibling felt comfortable around Vincent, and about Reno's decision to become Vincent's fiancée was also questioned by Baron. Baron said so, just wanted to make sure his sibling was fine in the future. Just knew his words were so presumptuous, that's why he apologized for the impolite treatment to Vincent. Baron knew that his sibling so respected Vincent, that's why Baron was afraid Reno's decision this time wasn't from his heart, but Vincent's desire alone. This time Reno was really touched. He saw how his brother loved him so much. Remembering when the three of them played together, as friends, of course the situation now was far above awkward feeling. Reno actually felt ashamed to his brother. He actually wanted to tell his brother that the engagement happened because Reno also loved Vincent. Feeling sorry for his brother, and his brother also asked for certainty, so Reno expressed all the existing truth about him and Vincent, even though he had to stutter. A quite long confession. For a while Baron saw his sibling take a long breath. Of course, he saw how his sibling tried to explain all that was missed by Baron. Like struck by lightning, Baron just knew that Reno had fallen in love with Vincent, so he was a little annoyed and tried to wake his sibling. Baron shook Reno's body strongly. He tried to confirm again what had been missed by him, because basically Baron was far in the remote city, and the news he got about Reno was also late known by him. Meanwhile on the other side Vincent just smiled seeing how two siblings in front of him argued. Enough for Vincent seeing how Baron almost tortured his own sibling, so Vincent started to pull Reno into his embrace and affirmed to Baron that he also loved Reno. Today seemed to be a bad day for Baron because he had to see the sight if his sibling did intimate in front of him. Vincent now tried to convince Baron about his relationship that was so good with Reno, so he would make Baron understand every action they did, especially their feelings, were already so deep and they loved each other. Baron didn't expect he heard all serious words from Vincent about the man who liked his sibling. Vincent's romantic words were also heard by Reno. He didn't expect that the man affirmed his relationship in front of his brother. Reno's heart started to melt. Vincent was the dream boyfriend he had been waiting for, so Reno ran towards Vincent and hugged him tightly like a child getting his toy. Unpredictable and couldn't be left. Now it was Baron who started to be cornered, seeing how his presence wasn't considered by a pair of lovers who were in love. Falling in love together was a sweet thing, but there were some contradictions in Vincent and Reno's relationship, especially Reno's brother, namely Baron, hadn't approved their relationship. Even repeatedly Reno said that Vincent and he loved each other, but still Baron didn't understand that he even still denied with his own thoughts about Reno and Vincent's relationship that didn't make sense. Realizing that Baron hadn't understood their relationship made Vincent take an extreme step where he tried to seduce Reno by saying that they had done a hot kiss. Even now Vincent also practiced how the hot activity they had done. The words kissing and imagining how they did it, of course, according to Vincent's question, made Reno even more crazy about the man. He was so happy when kissed sweetly by Vincent. The kissing scene would be done by Reno and Vincent. They tried to tease Baron with their actions, and almost the lips of the two lovers stuck to each other, but because feeling unbearable, Baron asked for them to stop doing hot things in front of him. From now on, Baron chose to understand about the decision chosen by his sibling or Vincent. Baron was already too shocked knowing the thing that made him fall ill. After realizing how his sibling loved Vincent made Baron have to let go of his sibling, even he was made sick thinking about the complexity that happened. Meanwhile, on the other side, Vincent was talking with Reno about his brother. Vincent thought that Baron was a good brother for Reno because Baron still thought about Reno's happiness, and Reno admitted it. Thanks to Baron, he could grow up without being too spoiled. Just the atmosphere became peaceful this time. Vincent returned repeatedly, where he tried to tease Reno. Vincent's breath felt warm when on Reno's nape. The man was very good at making Reno a powerless woman. According to Reno, Vincent was a lewd man who really wanted him. It felt Vincent couldn't stand to have intimate relations with Reno, but almost the relationship reached the peak. The plan was thwarted by Baron, and that had happened twice. Hearing how Vincent wanted him made Reno feel ashamed. To fulfill Vincent's request this time, Reno this time decided to surrender himself to the man he loved. Romantic night started. They passed together with a little conversation where lately Vincent started to be busy with kingdom affairs, and their time together became not much. Vincent loved Reno very much, and that was proven when he gently kissed Reno's forehead, who was now in his embrace. Vincent also started to be honest if later he would be busier because there was intercontinental diplomatic affairs. Reno realized with Vincent's words about their reduced time, but he was also happy because the little time left made them miss each other and become more romantic.